welcome to our kitchen. I'm Steve, and this is my lovely wife, Iris. In this episode of Cooking with Love, we're going to be covering a different family tradition. We're going to be making traditional Irish currant scones. Now, Iris was born in Dublin, Ireland, and she immigrated with her parents to America when she was a young girl. How old were you, Iris, when you came?
Around 2.5, so very young.
Now, Iris has been deeply involved in Irish culture. She's actually had a career in Irish dancing. She was a champion dancer. She taught Irish dance, and she's an adjudicator for Irish dancing. How many years have you been teaching now?
We'll put it like this, over 40 years. I've taught for many years with my sister Maura.
Now that's shocking because I know she doesn't look a day over 21.
Oh, you're funny.
Good.
No, so I've traveled back and forth to Ireland many times. When we were little, after my parents emigrated, the first time we actually went back was the year I was 12. We went for the summer, and I had 2 brothers and a sister, and we all danced, but we all loved everything Irish. And my Aunt Mabel's scones are really delicious, and we have a few other recipes we'll share later from Ireland, but even the mugs we're using today are Irish pottery.
Right. Now, I've also been fortunate in that I've traveled to Ireland with Iris, and I've got to meet most of her family is still in Ireland, and we've traveled around Ireland, and I have to say I fell in love with the Irish culture, the Irish music, and the Irish food. So we're going to be sharing some Irish recipes with you that are very traditional. Well, let's get started. The ingredients we need to make our traditional Irish scones is all-purpose flour, granulated sugar, dried currants, and if you can't get currants, you can use raisins, whole milk, cold butter that's been cut into pats, a little salt, and baking powder. We're going to mix all our ingredients together. Now, when I'm making this, I like to sift the flour, and I have an old-fashioned flour sifter. So first we put the flour in, and I think sifting the flour does make the scones a little lighter and fluffier. We're going to add the baking powder, the salt, and the sugar. And now we're just going to sift them all together. Next, we're going to add our cold butter that's been cut into pats. And I'm just going to make sure all the butter pieces are coated. And now we're going to cut the butter into the flour mix using a pastry cutter. If you don't have a pastry cutter, you could use a fork, or you could even use your fingers. I like to use a pastry cutter because it's a little bit easier to do. And you're going to continue to cut the butter until it's less than the size of a pea. It doesn't take too long. And I can show you here, you can see a little bit of the butter. It's about the size of a pea. Now we're going to add our currants. And we're going to make sure that they're coated well. And next we're going to add our cold milk, whole milk. Now, I start with 1 cup of milk, but I have a cup and a quarter in this jug. Now I'm going to use a spoon to mix the milk into the flour mix. This is going to be a soft, slightly sticky dough. And I do use a spoon and I try not to over mix it. And you can see it's still a little bit dry, and I did have a little bit of milk I reserved. I'm going to add that milk at this point. All right. Now at this point, I'm going to switch over to using my hands. And I'm going to mix it just until it comes together. All right, here's our finished dough. What I like to do is cut this into quarters. And again, it is a wet, sticky dough. And each quarter, I'm going to roughly shape into a rectangle. Then I cut that in half. And each half I cut into a diagonal. And that's going to make the shape of our scone. I'm going to place it onto a baking tray. I have the baking tray, I'm using a silicone mat, but you could easily use parchment paper, or you could even just make sure that your baking tray is well greased, and that'll work well. So each little triangle is going to be placed, and I'm just going to continue shaping these into rectangles and cutting them down. All right, so our dough has been cut into roughly triangular shapes. It's ready for baking. Now we've preheated our oven at 375. These are going to go in for a half hour. I like to check them after a half hour. They may need another 5 or 10 minutes. It depends on how wet the dough still is. And here are the finished scones. And now for my favorite part of the whole video, the taste test.
Delicious.
The scones are light, slightly sweet. They're delicious just as they are. However, a lot of people do enjoy scones by using a little extra butter on them or some strawberry jam. In a future video, I'm going to show you how to make homemade strawberry jam and how to preserve it. Iris, how do these compare to your Aunt Mabel's?
Oh, they're delicious. I have to say they might be a tad bit better. There's nothing better than a nice hot scone in the morning and a good cup of Irish tea.
Cooked with love. And we'll also place a file below where, with the link. Yeah.
But I have to say there's nothing better than a hot scone out of the oven and a cup of good